All right. Welcome, everybody, to our weekly live training that we do every Wednesday. Apologize for being late today, but we've had a few things that we're working on. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If you can let us know below in the comments where you're tuning in from, give us a like, a wow, share it. We're going to be talking tonight about a lot of people's favorite topic, money. There's lots of money secrets and money sources that successful real estate investors use. And tonight we're going to have the one and only Ray Sasser talking about money and where to get it, how to get it, things like that.
Doesn't it grow on trees, James?
Yeah, but you've got the money, you've got that tree hidden and you won't tell me where it is.
I think my family believes it grows on trees. But yeah, money's doing some funny stuff right now with inflation and appreciation. It's a whole different ball game, it seems. And it's like 1 week you're looking at life through a certain kind of glasses or certain filter, and then the next week you're looking at it differently. And now with the oil prices, I mean, we came back from our RIA meeting in San Antonio, and oil prices is $4 a gallon on the way back. So how is that going to affect everything with money? But as real estate investors, when I first started, it really didn't matter what the market was. You just had to deal with money differently depending on what market you were in. And now we're in a different market than when I started way back in the 80s, and the rules keep changing. Sometimes the rules are allow you to do certain kinds of deals really good, and then other times the rules say you can't do those deals like that. And so we've got to be flexible. In fact, I was talking to a guy at the RIA meeting, and just like notes, there are certain types of markets you can be in where notes are really important to understand how to buy and invest in. A lot of people don't think this is the market for that, but under the right circumstances, a note's good in any market. But so what is our big thing we want to try to accomplish tonight, James?
What we want to do is we want to give our audience, some useful sources and maybe some tips and action items that they can do to go out there, and if they've got a deal and maybe it's money that they're trying to put the deal together, how can they do it creatively to where they can make that deal happen? Because sometimes it's just one small minor thing that can be preventing that deal from being put together, and money or the lack of money should never be that case.
Yeah, and in our RIA meetings, a lot of those people have there's incredible power when you get around the group of people that are doing this business, because you find out how they do it, you find out who the players are, and you find out where the money is. And I think if you want to move really fast, like if you were to become a student or you were really to get serious about real estate investing, you've got to think in terms of our acronym we've got, which is CALM, which stands for K for should be C, but it's a K. K stands for knowledge, A stands for attitude, L stands for leads, and M stands for money. And so the money part of this, we just got to become very, very knowledgeable on it. And you'll find when you get around real experienced real estate investors, they understand. There's certain things they understand, and it's basically knowledge is power. So you always have to be learning. They understand attitude is what stops people and what makes people successful, because they've got the right attitude. And then leads, getting a regular flow of deals is really important, and then getting the money. And so if we're talking about getting money, then it just depends on what your strategy is, what your resources are, and what you know how to do, and then you go after that money. For example, if you're doing a BRRRR type deal where you're buying something, you're buying it, you're rehabbing it, and you end up refinancing it, then your source of money is going to be like institutional financing, and that's in our acronym SHIPS, the I is for institutional lending. And so if you're going to become a flipper or you're going to use the BRRRR method, you better understand institutional lending. In our workflow for a retail deal that we're selling, we've got like 53 steps on just dealing with institutional lenders. So you got to know those rules. And if you don't know those rules, there's a good chance you'll fail. And all you got to do is have one of those rules, violate one of those rules, and you're probably either going to fail or it's going to cost you real money. So if you're doing the BRRRR method, now that's for flip, then you got to know how to sell institutional lenders with a retail deal. If you're going to use the BRRRR method and borrow money, then you've got to know how to borrow that money if it's from an institution and what you should pay and who you should go through and how you evaluate the deal, understanding where the secondary markets come from, understanding how underwriters work, understanding how loan officers work. A loan officer at a bank is paid to be optimistic, whereas when it gets into the underwriter's hands, then the underwriter is paid to protect the institution from making bad loans. So we've got to understand them. And then, of course, there's always a secondary market, so that controls what the investors are buying the loans for and the interest rates they're willing to pay. And then there's different types of markets in the institutional world called it's going to be your local community bank. It's going to be your credit union. It's going to be certain community banks specialize in certain kinds of loans. So if you're doing apartment loans or strip center loans or mini storage loans or whatever, you're going to find that certain banks they develop those expertise in those fields, and they make a lot of those loans. In fact, they're more likely to say yes to a proposal that they have experience in than to say yes to something they have no experience in. For example, let's say you want to build strip centers. Well, you need to find out those kinds of banks that do that, and then you need to talk to them, and you need to get their help in helping you set that up, because they know how to evaluate their risk. Or if you went to a different community bank that's never loaned on a strip center before, there's probably a good chance they're going to say no. It doesn't matter how solid you are. And so we got to know just what we're doing, who specializes in that, and then we can go from there. So that's one of the things. And was there anything, any specific one of the SHIPS methods that you wanted to talk about, James?
No, I wanted to kind of run through all of them and just talk just a couple of minutes on each one of them.
Well, this is something Linda and I came up with together, and the SHIP stands for, each one of those stands for kind of a different source of money, a different way of using money. And so the S is basically stands for seller financing. And so I'll just share with you real quickly. So like when we do, if we do a 2-day class on real estate investing, we'll spend a lot of time on SHIPS, because where you get your money from is real important. So the seller financing, for example, is how we do it as a buyer or how we do it as a seller is real important. And you use, the documents are very dissimilar. They're similar, but they're not, because there's a lot of language we'll put in one document that's not in the other document, because they're serving two different purposes. In fact, the last thing you ever want to do is, if you're involved in seller financing, the last thing you want to do is have an attorney prepare those documents that's trying to be neutral to both parties. If the title company, for example, is preparing those documents, they're gonna make them neutral, and that's not what you want to do. If you're a buyer or if you're a seller, you want those documents to have the language in there that you need. And different goals are going to require you to have different clauses in there, and that's way beyond what we could cover. We could spend probably 2 or 3 hours just on seller financing, and that's just the first letter of SHIPS. But just realize it's an important issue out there, and you got to get your game up on what that is. So the next one is H is hard money. And hold on one second, James.
Another aspect of seller financing is a way to negotiate the deal to where the seller or the owner is carrying the note.
That's on seller financing.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I had to step away from the phone. I had a granddaughter over that decides she wants to scream when I'm on this phone call. So you want me to jump into hard money real quick?
Yeah, I was just when you stepped away, I was just finishing up on the seller financing just to clear that up.
Yeah, and I probably didn't say some important stuff, but there's so much important stuff, just the different kinds of clauses that you want to use. When we're doing the contracts too, and I'll just kind of throw this applies to all these methods, but when we're doing the contracts, we typically will have addendums added to those contracts or they'll be hardwired into the contract that reflect what the way that the documents will be drawn up. Is it interest, no interest, high interest, low interest, interest only, interest after a while, interest for variable interest rate, how the term, the type of term, and then just clauses of like how you pay them off, what happens if you don't pay them off. All those kinds of things have to be kind of spelled out in the contract if you're going to add them to the documents, because you can get to the end of the line and then the party on the other side, whether you're the buyer or seller, could object to them, and it could kill your deal, especially if those issues are critical to make that deal work. So so that's seller financing. The next one is hard money. Hard money has some major advantages and it has significant disadvantages. The disadvantages, you're probably going to pay more for hard money than you will for private money or one of these other methods. The advantage is the people, if you can find out what the hard money loan requirements are, they're more likely to follow through on what they're saying. In other words, if they say, yeah, we do these terms, blah, 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 hard money guys, their job, their role is to make sure there's money available to loan out to you under their underwriting guidelines. And their underwriting guidelines, in other words, what are the rules that they'll use to decide if you're a good risk or the deal's a good risk? Those rules vary from one hard money lender to the next. And it's important that you find out what those rules are, because if you go out and write a contract with somebody and you know what the rules are with a hard money lender, you can have, and they're a reputable hard money lender, then you can have the confidence that they're going to do what they promise they're going to do. Now, hard money lenders can also run out of money or access to money. Hard money lenders can be unethical or ethical. It's just like in any business, think of a hard money lender like a mechanic. There's some good mechanic shops and there's some bad mechanic shops. Typically, the more types of loans they do, the more frequently they do them, the better their reputation is, the more likely you're going to get the outcome that you expect. Now, there's at this point, one of the other letters in the ships is for private money. And I want to talk about private money right after hard money, just so you can kind of compare and contrast. So private money it can run the whole gauntlet. It could be where it looks they behave very, very similarly to hard money. Or it's like your buddy says, oh yeah, you go to your buddy and says, yeah, I need $50,000. And he doesn't even evaluate the risk. He just writes you a check. And that's very common, believe it or not. There's people that will loan you money based on their feelings about you or their trust or concept of you, and they don't even do their due diligence. So private money can go all over the place. It can be very tough or very regimented, like a hard money loan could be, or it could be very simple. One of the things to think about too is like when you get on Facebook, and we have a couple really large Facebook groups for investors, and hopefully you engage in those and participate in them. But a lot of those people that post on those Facebook groups, all we can do is delete them when we find out who they are. But there's a lot of hard private lenders. They call themselves a private lender, and they are really a hard money lender. And I'll tell you, if somebody's a private pardon me, if they're a hard money lender and they call themselves a private lender, then I think they're lying. Okay, I call that a lie. And if somebody's trying to do business with you and they're presenting themselves to be one thing and they're something else, I would say don't do business with them. Okay, because it won't get better; it gets worse. So that's private money, but that's down into when we do the ships, that's towards the end of the word. We're trying to make an acronym that went together. So we got seller financing, we got hard money. The I is institutional funding. We talked a little bit about that. And any one of these, James, if you have any questions or if anybody has any questions more specific about them, I'll do my best to answer those questions. And I'll tell you, every one of these we've done multiple times. And so we're not just talking from some theory or we've just read a real estate investing book and now we're going to teach it to you. We've done every one of these multiple times. So we got the seller financing, that's both buyer and seller. We got the hard money, we got the institutional financing. Then we have P is for private money. Okay, and then our private lender, and then the other P, there's two Ps, and that's partners, and the partner is going to be somebody that's either going to get an equity interest, but there's usually going to be some sort of partner, and they're going to help you get the money for the deal. Now, I guess in the technical sense, it wouldn't be just an interest-only play. It would be equity, because otherwise, are they really a partner? So think of a partner as somebody that can do interesting stuff if there's strong enough incentive. A lot of the creative deals that we do are going to fall under the partner deal. Private money's not, we won't really call that creative. And then so that gives us our SHIPP, and then our final letter is S, and that's for sub 2. And sub 2 is just a way that we take over.
We lost you, Ray.
From there, we turn around and put some cash out of our pocket. We take over the sub 2 and we start making the mortgage payments for the bank. So that's a creative deal. So our creative deals are going to be seller financing, partners, and subject to. Now, your best partners can also be your seller financing people. So they kind of overlap, but we want to really call out seller financing because that's such a big topic to talk about, and there's so many variables. And sub 2 is actually pretty simple concept when you break it down to its most basic structure. And think of a sub 2 as you're taking over an existing loan. You're not guaranteeing it, but you're taking it over and paying it. And that's all I mean when I say take it over. You're making the payments on it. Now, why the sub 2 is kind of turns into a big topic is because it's pretty technical. And everybody wants to know the technical side, but you don't need to be technical to negotiate a sub 2. You just need to make sure that you use the right language when you're talking to a seller that's going to allow you to do a sub 2. And that's kind of a thumbnail sketch. James, did you want to maybe break down any one of these or give a case study or an example of how we might have used one of these? A sub 2 is maybe a really good case study. One comes to mind that we recently worked out the numbers on, but how did you want to proceed?
Well, we do talk quite a bit about subject 2. Let's go a little bit different route tonight, and let's break down maybe a little bit of seller financing.
As a buyer or as a seller?
As a buyer, we're going to negotiate a seller finance deal with the seller. So
I'll give you an example of a real sub 2 or seller financing we did. A lady owned the house free and clear. Okay, so if we're doing seller financing, we might be able to seller finance it with real low interest rates, which effectively lower our cost to the property. Because remember, if it's a property, usually the tenant, depending on the kind of property, the tenant's going to be paying that property off for us. So how we control the income, that's via the tenant. Unless we do a wraparound, then that would be the buyer. So if we're gonna seller finance as a buyer, we can turn around and seller finance as a now as the owner. And that when we go to that second part, that would be a wraparound. But the first part, and we'll just keep it simple. The first part would be we're taking it on as a seller finance type structure where we're buying it from a seller. So we've got to convince them that we're worth the risk, because think of this as he's being the bank. So if he's real motivated, he's not going to be real critical of our proposal. That's just the nature of the beast. Motivated sellers are trying to solve a very specific problem. So if we can solve that problem, whatever it is, he's going to be less demanding on his underwriting guidelines as a seller. Now, a lot of sellers don't even think in terms of underwriting guidelines. They're just like, oh, here's the keys, and here, give me the note and give me a certain amount of cash, and I'll move on. So some of them are going to have very lax underwriting guidelines. Some of them are going to have very tough underwriting guidelines, and we want to be prepared to handle whatever life throws us. And we never know what version of seller is going to be allowing us to take over their loan. But if you treat it like you would if you were getting a loan from a hard money lender or institutional lender, and you do it in such a way that it will it will pass the smell test, then there's a good chance that the seller is going to let this happen if there's a reason for him to let it happen. And our goal is to give him those reasons to let it happen, or allow it to happen. If they're motivated, like I said, they're not going to be near as likely to have strict underwriting guidelines. But it's whatever the seller decides, whatever you can talk the seller into doing, or whatever you can persuade the seller into doing. And that's, we've got a negotiation class coming up, I think on the 26th of March. And, the art of persuasion is really important. You've got to explain to the seller why this is a good move on his part, and give him good reasons. And depending on his situation, it could vary on what those good reasons are. But if you're coming in there and you look kind of scraggly and you don't look reputable, and you're trying to do business with that person, they're going to judge a book by its cover. That's what we as humans do. We judge people literally in 5 or 6 seconds. We make our mind up. And then if you get the wrong impression, then after that 5 or 6 seconds, it's an uphill battle. You could be the greatest person in the world. I mean, like we've probably made over 10,000 mortgage payments in my career as a real estate investor. And we've got a phenomenal track record. But if I come in there and look scraggly, or I talk in a manner that makes him nervous, then he doesn't know the truth about me. He's just going to make his mind up based on what the cover of the book looks like. So always put your best foot forward. Be professional as you can be. Give them the reason to say yes for you, and give them the why it makes sense for him to do it. Besides just you as being a good person, what are the benefits that he can get it and seller financing? We did a deal where just a case study is where we seller financed a property. It was a 0 interest loan. And we did it, I want to say for 15 years. I don't remember the exact term, but we even put in the documents that we had the right to prepay, or we would allow her, the seller, to require us to prepay her note at any time in the future at a certain discount. We hardwired that in there. And even though she would have that option, we put that clause in there because we wanted, and this is an example of how you could be creative with seller financing. So we wanted her to understand that anytime she needed a check for $5,000, she could demand that from us. And by putting that in there, it made it clear to her that that was an option. And sure enough, even though it was a 0% loan, she made multiple demands from us over the course of that loan to prepay that $5,000. And And we were happy to do it because we were getting the discounts on that prepayment that increased our yield a lot. So think about what I'm saying. This gets a little complicated, and this is where in the 2-day class we can actually draw it up on the board and make it make sense. So what you really got to do is just like listen to what I'm saying and don't worry about the math. The math works. And so we would prepay a 0% loan, which normally you don't want to do that. But she would give us such a big discount for prepaying that $5,000. It was like it would cost us $5,000 to get $7,000 worth of benefit. So if I put those numbers in a financial calculator, I'm basically buying $7,000 of payments for $5,000. So anytime you can go and buy $7,000 worth of payments for $5,000, that gives you a yield. You're getting a return. I'm spending $5,000. I'm effectively getting $7,000 back in the extinguishment of the $7,000. So I'm buying $7,000 for $5,000. So why wouldn't you do that? If I could buy a dollar for 75 cents, I'm gonna buy as many dollars as I can, and I'm gonna buy them as often as I can. So we put that language in the contract, and what that did is it encouraged her, and we let her know about that clause and encouraged her. We had to explain it to her, and we took a lot of time making it make sense to her. But then anytime she needed that money in the future, she could reach out and grab it. And that turned out to be what she wanted to do. And for her to take on that seller financing, she wanted to have monthly money coming in, and she wanted to start traveling. And she liked the idea of having the monthly money come in. Now, we could have given it all to her at one time, but we gave her some reasons why that may not be the best in her best interest. And she agreed. And so we did that seller financing. So seller financing is going to take some persuasion. You're going to have to think outside the box. You're going to have to come up with some reasons. We've done enough seller financing as a buyer where we've pretty much figured out most of those creative. That's probably not fair to say because there's no limit to how creative you can be on this stuff. But we've come up with most of the common scenarios of why people would want to do seller financing. And so when we listen to people and we talk to people and we try to understand what they're trying to accomplish, now we know, hey, does what she's trying to accomplish fit into the idea of doing seller financing? So I hope I didn't confuse that too much, but so that's some of the things you can do with seller financing. One of the things that we kind of preach is we're not against wholesaling. We're okay with wholesaling under right circumstances. We're okay with hoteling. We're okay with flipping. We're okay with buy and hold. We prefer to buy and hold in some way, whether we're buying and holding in the sense that we're turning around and renting it, or we're buying it and then we're creating a long-term note in the form of a wraparound. So we'll call that technically that's not a buy and hold, but we're going to call it a buy and hold because we're taking this thing and we're turning it into monthly payments for the next 15 or 20 years or 30 years. That's our whole goal. And so we take something without using any more money of ours than necessary and create as many monthly payments coming into our pocket into the future. And when you start playing that game, there's going to be times when you're thinking about wholesaling a property and you're going to say, wait, I can make $300 a month for the next 30 years, or I can make an $8,000 wholesale fee. And then you're going to wake up and you're going to say, or the wholesalers are going to wake up and they're going to say, well, wait, I don't need that $8,000 right now. I'd rather have the $300 a month for the next 15 years or 30 years because it ends up being a whole lot more money. So that's where we want to get with our students. We try to really focus on that financial freedom number and how to get those residuals incomes coming in for the future as much as possible. And we're not saying don't wholesale. We're not saying don't flip. But I talked to a guy today, and he was talking about hoteling. And I said, well, what is your goal? Because he wants to partner up. And I said, what is your goal? And he says, I want to buy and flip, and buy and flip. And I said, well, I don't mind being your partner, but I don't want to work that hard. Not on one transaction. what I'd rather do is buy and figure out how to create income stream going into the future. But now this guy, he may need the money. He may have big bills. He needs to get the money. But as long as you're in that hamster, what do they call that? A hamster run, James? A hamster wheel. As long as you're on that hamster wheel, you've got to slow that thing down because you're thinking poor. As long as you keep thinking poor, you're going to continue to make decisions that make you money now, but in the long run end up costing you a lot of money. So just be careful with that and do your best to try to hold on to some of these income streams. And some deals are really, really suited for long-term income stream. And it's a shame to throw those away. So on those deals, be really careful.
So let's talk a little bit.
I feel like I kind of went down a rabbit hole. I apologize.
No, that was a very good rabbit hole that you went down. In fact, if you like your rabbit holes, leave a comment and say rabbit hole. That's so Ray that, his rabbit holes are doing some good. But for the next few minutes, Ray, I want you to talk about some of the different ways to do partnerships and kind of tie that in with private money, because one of the things that, there's people out there that be like, well, I don't necessarily want to possibly do this deal because I don't want to give up, half or 3/4 of my deal. But what if there's other ways that you can do a deal and not have to give up all that equity?
Well, if you're doing partnerships, the real thing, you just got to think it through. In fact, Pat says this, you got to play the tape all the way through. And I like what he thinks about the way he says that, because a lot of times we're doing rehabs and stuff like that. And we're not starting at the beginning and playing it all the way through. But if you play it all the way through in your mind, you'll see that it will change the way you do things. For example, let's say you've got me and James got full-time jobs. We're both working 60 hours a week. We don't have any rehab experience. We don't have any money. And we just got this dream, and it's going to cost a lot of money, and we're going to have to borrow money. Well, that's to me like a recipe for a bad partnership, because who's bringing what to the table? Who's responsible for what? This concept of having the right butt in the right seat, that's not a little thing. That's everything. So you got to play the tape all the way through. So if you're looking at getting a partner, you got to say, does this partnership make sense? For example, a real classic example of a great partnership is, say somebody's 60 years old and they've been buying houses for 40 years, and they want to, and there's a lot of people like that. I've probably been buying houses for 40 years. I'm older than 60 though. I'm 65. So, but there's people who they want to stay in real estate, but they don't want to go out there and kill themselves every day or get involved in a hardcore rehab. Well, to that person, it makes a lot of sense to partner up with somebody who can do that, because they're going to keep you out of trouble probably. And trust me, like with our students, sometimes I don't want to say it like this, but it's almost like a knockdown, drag out fight to like get something through some people's head. And it's like they've got this preconceived notion without having any real experience of how things should be done. And then they're going to come and tell you, who's done 300 of these or 400 of these, they're going to tell you how you should do it. Like, to me, that's not a partnership I'm going to be involved in, so, but you've got to know when you're partners with somebody, you've got to know who's got the authority to make what decisions, how decisions will be made. You got to know who's bringing what to the table. If it's a person that's got a lifetime full of experience and he's gotten himself in trouble and figured out how to get himself out of trouble, if you're a beginner, then you want that person as your partner. They have a lot of value, and you shouldn't worry about equity. You should worry about having a good deal, and you should worry about learning from that partner, and hopefully he'll keep you out of trouble. And that partner probably ought to be the one bringing the money to the table. So different partnerships work different ways. Apartment syndications, basically, a lot of partnership syndications will have an active, successful apartment investor who will have passive investors involved in the deal. Now, if if I was if I was going to go out tomorrow and really just start putting all my energy into apartment investing, and I was just starting out, then I would go with a real active. I'd go with an active investor with a real track record, something I can see and smell and look at and prove to myself this is the real thing. Then I would go in as a passive investor, but only with the understanding that that I get to see what's really happening. I don't want to just if we're trying to become better real estate investors and we're trying to learn how to do this, we don't want to get involved in transactions where we're not getting anything out of it other than making money, in my opinion. But if you're some passive investors are like, no, I've got a high income job. I'm working 60 or 50 hours a week. I don't want to give up time with my family. And I don't want to become an expert on this. And then that your right place is to be a passive investor in real estate deals. Now, just remember, the better the track record of the active investor is, the less crap he's going to take. He's not going to, for example, he's not going to bring 10 lenders in if he's got a super track record or 10 partners when he can partner with 2 people or 3 people. And if you're getting involved in something and there's a lot of little pieces, as the lead investor in that transaction, I don't want to have 20 people that I'm accountable to. I don't want to talk to 20 people on a small transaction. Now we're talking about a multi-million transaction, $1 million transaction. Yeah, that makes sense. But if we're talking about $100,000 deal and I got 4 partners in that, it's not worth it to me. I mean, I'd rather just have one partner and be accountable to the one partner, because a lot of times you got to train your partners. You got to tell them what to expect, how this is supposed to be set up. In fact, that's why we do group coaching. I'm too busy in real estate to take an individual person and coach him. In fact, I don't know how any coaches do that, how they coach people individually, unless they're charging $50 and $100,000. Because if they're really involved in real estate, there's no way they can give up their time to be one-on-one with a student and be that coach. In fact, I think that's a unicorn. I think a person that's not doing group coaching, that's doing individual coaching, and is really out there every day learning and growing and making deals happen in real estate, they'll make a lot more money doing the deals than they ever would coaching. And the only reason we do it is because we do group coaching. And so then we get people on our coaching calls, and then we go that route and we talk about it. And our goal with our coaching calls is to spend time on masterminding and brainstorming, and then we actually go through a curriculum. And that's probably the way the group coaching should be done. And I know that's a rabbit hole, but when you're an investor, your time is real valuable. If you're an active investor, and your time's real valuable. And so when you get into these partnerships, if it's going to be a real time suck, then that's not going to be a good fit. And so just think about it. And so in a partnership, different people are going to bring different things to the table. Make sure it makes sense. Now, like when my brother and I think we did so good as partners is because I would get the deal, I would find the deals, I would locate the deals, I would get the deals under contract, I would fix the properties up on the beginning side. And then once we got the properties put in, and Audie would help on that, but once we got the deals put in inventory, then Audie would take it over from there. And then he would act like a property manager. He'd keep it stabilized. He'd qualify the tenants. He'd make sure we were dealing with the right kind of people, that we were charging the right amount of rent, or whatever our exit strategy was. So that relationship worked out really good, because I was responsible for certain things. He was responsible for certain things. And it fit our personalities. It fit, because I'm kind of more of an engineered brain, and I get a little bit more technical on stuff, where Audie is more of a people person. And so Audie could literally deal with the people issues, and I could deal with the engineering issues that you're going to find in a broken down house somewhere, and get it back online and be productive. It was just, we were built that way, but it turned out really good for us. So there's lots of ways to do the partnership. Now, partnerships don't have to be 50-50 either. It could be 80-20, it could be 90-10, it could be 75-25. I mean, we've done it all. And there's no limit to how you can do partnerships. Just make sure that you're compatible, that you like each other, you respect each other, and it's very, very clear in the beginning who's responsible for what. If James and I got in a deal, for example, and James is responsible for the rehab, and say I'm responsible for the money. Well, James is responsible for the rehab. That's his responsibility. If he's going to be out of town and he needs to be meet a contractor, that's his problem, not mine. Okay, he's responsible. Now, if James calls me up and says, Ray, hey, I got to be out of town. These guys are supposed to come out. Can you go meet them? Of course. I mean, I can do it. But remember, he's responsible for setting up the meeting. He's responsible for setting up the time. He's responsible for getting me over there. That's because he's the owner of that outcome, MFO. He's the owner for that outcome. And it's his responsibility to make sure I'm there. And if I say, no, I'm tied up, then he's got to deal with it. He's got to solve that problem. Just like if I'm supposed to sell it, I might say, well, James, look, and say I'm going to meet 15 buyers. Well, I might say to James, well, James, I can't meet buyer number 13 because I'm out of town. And can you do it? And of course, James will say, yeah. And there's got to be that camaraderie, that trust. But when one person ends up doing all the work or one person ends up making all the money, those partnerships don't last. They usually end up in court or in fights or even worse. So partnerships can be, I think it's important to understand and become knowledgeable about how to set up and how to structure partners and how to protect the other person and how that other person needs to protect you. So, but I think they're very, very worth doing. But you just got to play the tape all the way through is all I can say. And if you have a specific, and that's something you can put in the chat box, if you have a specific scenario on how you would set up a partnership with, say, you and somebody else, or if you were trying to do some sort of joint venture where you were bringing something to the table and you want to bring other parties, ask away, or send an email and we'll or send a chat. And if we don't have time to really go into detail, I'll answer it in the Facebook group.
Yeah, and by the way, if you want to know more about partnering with us and working with us, leave that comment below and comment partner, and then we can reach out to you and let you know what we have available and how we can work with you on that. So again, the key word there is partner if you want to work with us. But Ray, one other question that comes to mind here: have you ever brought multiple private lenders to the table, and what did that look like?
Yeah, you've got to worry about their lien position. So when you bring in a private lender to the table, in my opinion, you've got to make sure you're protecting their interests to the best of your ability. In fact, in some of our RIAs, a lot of beginning real estate investors try to bring partners to the table as private lenders, and they don't know how to protect that private lender, or they'll get them involved in a second lien, which for say something like gap funding, which you can Google that, but they'll create a second lien to get the person involved, and a lot of times a private lender doesn't understand the risks that they're taking with a second lien, and so that's something that you don't do lightly. Only sophisticated lenders should be doing second liens. So just make sure that you protect their interests and structure them. If you're doing multiple lenders, then you've got to be careful how you set that up and make sure you protect their interests, because if you do it wrong, one lender is going to have a second lien position and the other lender is going to have a third lien position, which is even worse. Or it might be one has a first lien position and one has a second lien. And so you've just got to make sure that you set that up right and protect your lenders, or your private lenders in this case. You expect a hard money lender, if they're a true hard money lender, they already know what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. And because they're pretty regimented on this first lien, second lien issue, they're going to say no to a lot of these situations because their underwriting guidelines. Their underwriting guidelines, might be, hey, we only loan 70 cents of the ARV, and we require the borrower to have 10% down, and we're required to be a single family dwelling, and we're required to be in this city, and we're required to meet our inspection. And, so that those are typical underwriting guidelines that every lender is going to have, but they're going to vary from lender to lender. It's going to vary from the level of risk that the lender is willing to take, what the experience of the lender is. I'll give you a real life example. So in 2009, there was a lot of loans that were going bad because hard money lenders got into the game. And what they were doing is they were borrowing money from friends and family and doing everything else. And then they were loaning it, but they'd never even rehabbed a single house. And I know one guy specifically that was doing this, and somebody went in and loaned this hard money lender money to loan out to borrowers. And so they ended up loaning a lot of money to this person, and not just them, but other people. This guy didn't know how to evaluate a rehab, didn't know anything. And when the market turned around because he didn't do solid investments, what happened is those properties, the people that were buying it walked away from them, and because the numbers weren't that good, and when they were viable in a super hot market and they stopped being viable, then a certain percentage of those people walked away from those loans. And because their underwriting guidelines sucked and they didn't know how to evaluate a property, the hard money lender now is stuck because they couldn't repay their underlying investors. And as a result of that, the hard money lender went out of business, and he may have actually went to jail, or I think that was threatened. And so, and we went and looked at some of those properties, and I could go in instantly and say, these numbers don't work for anybody. They didn't work for the buyer. They didn't work for the hard money lender. And that hard money lender wasn't loaning his money, right? He was loaning out somebody else's money. So if you're that investor that you're loaning money to a hard money lender, or you're that private lender that's loaning money to a borrower that's going to fix things up, you still got to have some real underwriting guidelines that protect you if the worst case scenario occurs. Worst case scenario, the death of the borrower, the non-performance of the borrower, bankruptcy of the borrower, borrower. So you just got to watch it and just be careful with that. Anyway, so I don't know if that answered the question, but
it did. Pretty much it did. I'm going to give you a chance to go down one more rabbit hole here in just a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Because last night we haven't even touched on a topic, and it's not. Maybe it's relevant to this, but another source of money would be like self-directed retirement accounts. We had Equity Trust last night at our San Antonio RIA meeting, and he gave a really good presentation on that. So I wanted to give you the opportunity in a couple of minutes to speak on how you use your retirement accounts to buy real estate, but also wanted to let everybody know that this Saturday we have Tom Berry at our Houston RIA that he's going to be talking about how he used a lot of the stuff that we're talking about tonight and built his portfolio to 400 units in 4 years. And he's going to be the keynote speaker in the main meeting. And then there's also going to be an afternoon workshop as well. And he's going to go through a lot of the strategies and things that we're talking about tonight. He's going to cover quite a bit of that. So Ray, we do have just a couple of minutes left. So go down the retirement account rabbit hole for a few minutes.
This is why, well, first of all, Kent with Equity Trust, they're managing $32 billion of 401 self-directed IRAs and 401ks. And I believe they're the largest real estate oriented custodian for retirement accounts. So a lot of their account holders are loaning money out to investors. And it used to be, I think I asked him before I got him on stage, I asked him what was the amount of money held in retirements account. I think he said $7 trillion. I can't remember what his answer was, but it was in the trillions. And It used to be that if you wanted to borrow money from somebody or you'd go to an institution. When I started, there weren't really, we didn't think in terms of private lenders in the mid 80s. We did a little, but not like it is now. And um, um, now that people can self-direct their IRAs and their 401ks, they can put the money in things that they want to, as long as it's not prohibited. So there's a whole industry that started um, um, uh, making money available for those kinds of loans, those kinds of purchases. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to do as much as we can in our retirement accounts, and it is a learning curve to go through, and it's not something you can do overnight, but you can get started relatively simply. But if you're going to start really, really pushing the boundaries, and boundary is not the right word, if you're really, really going to try to turn up the volume, then you're going to have to learn the rules. You have to become more of a student of the rules. If you're going to do a transaction here or there, or you're going to do one kind of transaction over and over, like say be a private lender, you just really got to learn the rules that relate to that. And you have the overlay of dealing with a retirement account. So you just got to learn those. You got to learn the rules of being a private lender. Then you got to learn the rules of having to be a private lender with retirement funds. And it sounds like a lot, but it really, the bigger important thing is you don't have to be stuck earning 1 or 2% or even less. You can be a lender, and you can, quote, kind of partner up with that guy that's out there every day making this happen. I mean, that's what we've been doing for 40 years. And there's a lot of people like me that's been out there learning and growing and making our fair share of mistakes and getting better at what we're doing and scaling and doing that kind of stuff. So as a person that's out there, and we're always looking for money, then we don't have to rely on the institutions near as much, because a big percentage of that money has moved over from being in the institution and controlled by the management of that institution to being in a different kind of institution, but not being controlled by that, being governed by some rules. Right? You got to always have rules, but the money's controlled by us, the account holders. So if James said, "Hey, Ray, I got this deal out there, and I need $30,000," I can go and basically go to my custodian and say, "Send $30,000 to James so he can do this deal." Now we're going to have paperwork, and we're going to decide what my interest in that 30,000, how I'm going to get my money back on that $30,000, whether it's interest or equity or whatever. So if you're going to be a real estate investor, you're going to run out of money pretty quick. And no matter how much you start with, unless we're talking in the multi-millions, but it's nothing to run through $2 million. And we're going to have to master how to use other people's money to make these deals work. And one of the things when we first started, I always thought of the bank as having some great knowledge, just like I did with attorneys, some great knowledge on how to do things and set things up. And what I learned later is Dealmakers are a unique breed. They're like an attorney. They're like a banker. They're learning how to put these different things together and make a deal. And they're making lemonade out of lemons because they're figuring out how to put this together. And trust me, in this world, that person's a lot more valuable in the market than a banker and a lawyer and even a private lender. The guy that can take money and grow that money through whatever means possible, they have probably the highest value in this market, much more than the banker, much more than the lawyer. And once you believe that, once you realize that, then you're not gonna beg for money anymore, because you realize that they need you more than you need them. And it's hard for somebody to believe that when they're first starting, because I didn't believe it either. In fact, it became true to me. In fact, Audie and I were having breakfast the other day, and Audie was telling the story where we borrowed money on our second or third deal, and he basically told the banker to his face. And I was shocked when he said it because I was nervous. I wanted the banker to say yes. And the banker wanted to give us money in a certain manner. And Audie said, that's not going to work for us. And I thought, oh my God, we just lost the loan. And the banker said, well, how do you want us to do it? And Audie said, do it like this, ABC. And the banker said, yeah, we can do that. So we literally went from I thought losing a loan to Audie telling the banker how to do the loan. And when you realize that we are important element, the banker, he's got a real problem. He's got money in his bank that's not earning interest. And if he can get some real proven people with track records, they're going to beg to put your money to work for. And it begs probably too strong a word, but they're not going to say no as long as if they understand it, they're going to say yes. It's that simple.
Yes, as long as the deal makes sense, you should not have a problem getting your money. So that's going to wrap up tonight's show. Wanted to clarify the negotiating class that you're referring to, Ray. That is going to be on Zoom, and if you can find where to find the information on that is at alamoria.org. Hal, if you could put that in the comments. It's alamoria.org. Just go to the events calendar, and we are putting things on the calendar. It's filling up. We have lots of great stuff coming up. So I would refer to that for our upcoming events. And that's all we got. We'll see you out there. And if there's anything that we can do, leave us a comment and let us know, especially if you got questions or you want to work with us or know more about our events. Leave us a question.
Okay, well, great, James. You did great. Thank you, Hal. Y'all guys did great.
Thank you, Ray. See y'all guys later.
Bye.